with Tyson Fury's current situation, his baby daughter being unwell in hospital, the prospect of his trilogy fight against Deontay Wilder happening on October 9th is questionable, according to many people, and certainly Dillian Whyte. He says he is ready to step in and face Deontay Wilder on October 9th if Tyson Fury can't make it. Now, we know that Dillian Whyte has been pursuing, that's the only way to describe it, a Deontay Wilder fight for many years now. For him, it's more than just about the WBC belt because Wilder's not WBC champion anymore. If Tyson Fury doesn't go through with the October 9th bout for whatever reason, and the WBC don't strip Fury or make him champion in recess, it seems Dillian Whyte is happy to fight Deontay Wilder anyway because it's apparently personal. I've spoken about this before. From what I've heard, the word on the grapevine is that Dillian Whyte and Deontay Wilder have had a beef for many years over a girl. I'm sure Dillian Whyte would say it was whoever, his side piece or whatever the case may be. Apparently, Deontay Wilder was with this girl after Dillian Whyte. I'm sure Deontay Wilder would try and say he stole the girl, etc., etc. But that appears, according to the rumors on the grapevine, to be where this beef originally stemmed from. And it's just snowballed from there. And you know, people might look at it and say it's very trivial to still be holding a grudge over something like that happened so many years ago, and that Dillian Whyte would probably, lose to Deontay Wilder, or this obsession he has with Wilder will probably backfire. But as I've mentioned in previous videos, fighters who are obsessed with other fighters don't always put in a stellar performance or end up beating the fighter they're obsessed with. But in many cases, they do. Vitaly Klitschko was obsessed with Lennox Lewis. He was studying him for many years before they fought, whereas Lennox Lewis really wasn't paying Vitaly Klitschko any mind. Lennox Lewis took on Vitaly Klitschko at 2 weeks' notice. They were both set to fight that night anyway. Klitschko was going to be on Lewis's undercard. Lewis was going to be top of the bill against Kirk Johnson. But Lewis's opponent, Johnson, was injured, I believe, if memory serves me correct. And they said, okay, well, we'll take Vitaly off the undercard and stick him in against Lewis in the main event. And Lewis was like, yeah, cool. In retrospect, Lewis, who'd been out the ring for a year following his win over Mike Tyson, was in his late 30s. He had one leg out the ring in terms of he was looking at retirement, because he was talking about retirement even after the Tyson fight. So, and he came in, of course, at his career heaviest against Vitaly Klitschko. So he wasn't in the best of shape, but he was so contemptuous of Vitaly Klitschko because he really didn't rate the Eastern Europeans at that time. He had knocked out Andrew Golota in one round, and Golota had kind of been hyped up, particularly after he beat up Riddick Bowe twice, as one of the top 2-3 heavyweights in the division. Lewis knocked him out in one round, and going into the Vitaly Klitschko fight, Lewis had told journalists that basically he thought it would be a repeat of the Golota fight when he fights Vitaly Klitschko. Whereas Vitaly Klitschko took Lennox Lewis very seriously. He actually admired Lennox Lewis. He studied his style, the way he would deconstruct opponents. And he was actually coming up with a game plan, formulating a game plan of how he would beat Lennox Lewis if he fought him years before they actually fought. Now, ultimately, Vitaly Klitschko did lose. He got hit with too many shots, and Lewis cut up his face, and the fight was stopped, and rightly so. But he put up a very, very gallant effort, and many people had him up on the scorecards at the time of the stoppage. Obviously, it's a 12-round fight, not a 6-round fight, so it doesn't really mean much, but still, he gave Lewis one of his tougher fights. I mean, Lewis had many tough fights in his career, of course. The Ray Mercer fight was probably the toughest, I think. Just from as an outsider looking in, it looked like the toughest. But the Vitaly Klitschko fight was definitely up there as well. And it's one which a lot of people remember because, of course, Lewis said he would give Vitaly a rematch. In the end, he didn't. As I say, he already had one leg out the ring, one eye on retirement going into that fight. And after the fight, I guess he felt like, you know what, it's time to hang them up. I remember watching a documentary on Lennox Lewis when he was in his first reign as WBC champion. And he was talking about when to retire. And his original plan was to become undisputed champion, defend the undisputed title once, then retire. That was the original plan. But of course, Oliver McCall scuppered that plan. But in this documentary, I remember Lewis saying that he doesn't want to be like the Sugar Ray Leonards and the Muhammad Alis who are constantly tempted out of retirement. He said when he retires, he wants to retire at the top. But the temptation is always there because there's always a new challenge. There's always a new challenger. There's always somebody else who the fans want you to fight. And it's like a trap. And he was very cognizant of that trap. And he said he didn't want to fall for that trap. And so when he didn't have the rematch with Vitaly Klitschko, I wasn't surprised because I remembered what he'd said all those years ago about not being caught in that trap. But anyway, as far as this Dillian Whyte, Deontay Wilder situation, again, that obsession he has with Deontay Wilder may allow him to perform better against the guy if they fight anytime soon than maybe I'm thinking, because I've always felt as though Deontay Wilder would beat Dillian Whyte. I've cited another example of a fighter who's obsessed with another fighter, and that was Holyfield being obsessed with Mike Tyson. Holyfield was thought by most people to be washed up by the time he fought Tyson in 1996, November 9th. Most people thought he was washed up. I thought he was washed up. I'd seen him get stopped by Riddick Bowe. I'd seen him lose to Michael Moorer. He'd had his license taken away over a heart condition. He didn't look good in his comeback fight against Bobby Ches. Mike Tyson had been blowing people away. Beat Frank Bruno in the rematch easier than he did in the first fight. Knocked out Peter McNeely, Buster Mathis Jr., destroyed Bruce Seldon in one round. So going into that Holyfield fight, it looked like Mike Tyson all the way. I think Holyfield was something like 25-1 underdog. But he was obsessed with Tyson. Don King picked Holyfield for Tyson as basically a soft touch, really. Even though Holyfield was former undisputed cruiserweight champion, former undisputed heavyweight champion, again, everybody thought he was washed up. And according to Manny Stewart, he spoke to Don King on the phone and warned Don King that this was a bad match for Mike Tyson, because when he trained Holyfield a couple years earlier for the Riddick Bowe rematch, the entire camp, Holyfield was just obsessed with talking about Mike Tyson. Manny Stewart said that Holyfield was the most egotistical fighter he'd ever worked with. And you don't tend to get that, right, from Holyfield in terms of the way he comes across in public. He doesn't come across as egotistical, but Manny Stewart said in training camp, he was extremely egotistical and he was really upset with all the adulation Mike Tyson was getting from the press, the public, and so on. And this is when Mike Tyson was still in prison. And Holyfield was still really upset that Tyson was getting all this adulation and he wasn't getting the respect that I guess he felt he deserved. So he's training for this Riddick Bowe fight, a rematch. The first fight he lost comprehensively. And yet, rather than focusing on Bowe, he's talking about Tyson the whole camp. And Manny Stewart said to him, look, you need to focus on Bowe. Forget about Tyson. Tyson's in prison. We don't even know if he's going to fight again. Why are you obsessed with this guy? Focus on Riddick Bowe. But yeah, Manny Stewart said that he spoke to King before the Tyson-Holyfield fight and said, look, this guy's obsessed with Tyson. He's been preparing for Tyson for years. You don't understand. Mike doesn't understand what's coming. Don doesn't understand what's coming. This is what Manny Stewart basically, I'm paraphrasing, but this is what Manny Stewart said, the claims he said to Don King on the phone. So that's an example of an obsessed fighter going up against the guy who is kind of dismissive. Will Deontay Wilder be dismissive of Dillian Whyte if they fight? Will he take him lightly? Will he think that it's a soft touch? Will he look at that Alexander Povetkin fight and say, all I have to do is land one right hand on this guy and I'm going to land a right hand at some stage. I'm not really worried about what he's thrown at me. Will that be Deontay Wilder's attitude? Even if that is his attitude, does that mean he's necessarily going to lose? Will he still be able to win even if he comes in nonchalant? Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. And should Dillian Whyte be careful about what he asks for with regards to the Wilder fight? Do you think he's trying to bite off more than he can chew? And what are the odds? What are the chances of Dillian Whyte stepping in to face Wilder on October 9th? I think it's virtually zero, because even if Tyson Fury didn't go through with the fight, I don't think Wilder's people would want him going in there against Dillian Whyte. Even if Wilder thinks it's an easy fight, I don't think his people would want to risk it, unless somehow the Tyson Fury fight becomes dead in the water and the Dillian Whyte fight is the next best option financially, then I just don't see Wilder's team allowing him to take it. So let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Come and join me on Patreon and access my weekly no-holds-barred, censorship-free podcast where we lift the lid on a wide range of controversial topics. It's not mainstream friendly, it's not politically correct, but that's the whole point. We dare to stand as a beacon of reason against an army of insanity. Just head on over to my Patreon page and select the tier called Hatman Hot Topics. You'll gain access to a minimum of 2 hours of exclusive content every single week, including podcasts, videos, interviews, live stream Q&A sessions, as well as my popular Confessions of a Nightclub Bouncer series. Not to mention a vast back catalog of hundreds of hours of previous episodes. You can listen via the Patreon app with the option to download in high quality MP3. We've also got a Discord server where you can come and chat and hang out with myself and other members. There's no contract, no commitment, and you can cancel at any time. So come and join our community of free and critical thinkers by signing up with me here on Patreon today.